on this episode of Spirit Talk. So when someone says, though, how do I see more? Like, I want to see more ghosts. And I'm afraid, well, that means you've probably seen something negative. So what you have to do is, once again, go back to protection, and you have to state the intent. I would like to see you, and I've done that. I mean, when I was a little kid, I used to, see in the darkness and in the shadows, and I realized that I could look to where the moonlight is, then I could look to the darkest corner of the room. Then if I looked in between that gradation between light and dark, and I focused on that, I would start to see things moving around. Why? Well, it's because of the spectrum, the visual spectrum. Hi, I'm Chris Fleming, the creator of Spirit Talk. You're listening to the podcast where I'll be bringing you the greatest thinkers, researchers, and contributors from around the world to discuss what we know in the field of the paranormal, life after death, and the pursuit of higher consciousness. Hey guys, it's Chris Fleming with Spirit Talk. Remember? Yeah, I know. It's been 8 months since the last podcast, 132, and this is actually podcast number 133, where I want to continue the psychic questions and answer them for you that I had posted on Twitter, which is now called X. Amazing how much stuff has changed in the last few months. But I had posted on Twitter a question. When it comes to a sixth sense and psychic abilities, what questions do you have? And what I wanted to do is answer those questions on this podcast as best as I can, based on my perspective, my experience, and 17 plus years being a spiritual counselor and medium in my private practice in helping people. The last time we did this, I remember we had a couple questions that my mom and I had discussed, which is podcast 132. So if you have not listened to any previous podcasts or did not listen to the podcast before this, I would say stop and go back to 132, which was out in January, and listen to that podcast, then listen to this one, because this is going to be a continuation of some of those questions. I think it's important. We are in a world where there's a lot of craziness going on. Alternate facts, untruths, and now, within the last 8 months, you finally have the government discussing and telling us that there's aliens, military personnel coming forward and saying, hey, these non-human biologicals, they're calling them, do exist, and this is extraordinary. And if you've been paying attention to some of the conversations, some of the individuals have come out and said that they're telepathic, that they can communicate through thought. It's not the normal speech. They're able to use consciousness. And hopefully we'll be hearing more about that. That goes into thought transference. That goes into telepathy. What that would mean is that highly intelligent beings are able to communicate with consciousness through other means, through telepathy. And that is something that we discuss as mediums and in the paranormal and supernatural, is dealing with these psychic abilities, dealing with thoughts that are put into our head or hearing these voices, as well as communicating with our consciousness by collecting or connecting with the collective and accessing information that travels through there, both past, present, and when you go through certain forms of consciousness, you look at futuristic possibilities. So we're going to answer some of the questions that you, the follower, the listener, had posted on Twitter and also on Facebook. Now, if you are not following me on social media, if you have Facebook and Instagram, you can follow me at Chris Fleming Official. And my last name is 1M. It's Fleming, Fleming. So you can follow me on Facebook. My public page is Chris Fleming Official. I also have an Instagram page for my artwork, which is Chris Fleming Artwork. On Twitter, which is now called X, but I'm always going to call it Twitter, it's Chris Fleming 91. Chris Fleming 91. The reason I put 91 is because of Psalm 91 that talks about an angels. It's one of my favorite psalms. So that's my social media. Please follow me on social media. I have been, over the last 8 months, dealing with a lot of things in my life, with dealing with stuff with my mom. She's in a care center. Finally sold the house that I've been working on for 2 years to fix up and take care of, because my stepdad pretty much left it in disarray before he passed away. So there was a lot of work that needed to be done. And I was the coordinator to do all that as well as work on that for the past 2 years. So we finally got that house sold for my mom and put her in a care center. The other thing is what's been difficult is there's one thing I can't talk about that I plan to talk about in the future. But the second thing is not only with my health, dealing with my neck pain that I've been struggling with since my car accident in 2009, and trying to find solutions, which I actually just had a facet joint block done on July 13th, I think it was, or 14th, where I've found a surgeon in UIC that is looking at it, and my left side of my neck, the C3, C4, is starting to fuse together, which would explain why I'm getting a lot of lockups on my left side of my neck, causing further sleeping problems and moving my neck to the left and the right, as well as muscle tension and spasms. The other thing is that my friend Susan had put together a GoFundMe campaign. Susan Cummins had put together a GoFundMe to try to raise some money for my stem cells, because it's cost around $12,000. The doctor that I talked to is around $12,500. Another doctor, it's $17,000. I just can't afford that. So I've not had the money because I've been spending a lot of money not only on my own medical bills for the past 10 years that insurance doesn't cover, but then also because my cats had gotten sick and what Noir went through last year. I spent just over $10,000 in 2022 for all the medical bills for Noir, and I had already accumulated close to $3,800 this year, which had been coming out of my own pocket. So, but Susan was nice enough to do the GoFundMe where we raised $8,000 to go towards the $12,000. So hopefully over the next few months, depending upon what my neurosurgeon wants to do with my neck, is I'm going to be selling stuff, selling a bunch of collectibles and stuff like that, and stuff that I've had over the years to try to raise that additional $4,000 for the stem cells, so that once I get the go ahead from my doctor, I can go ahead and go get the stem cells. The second thing is that I want to share this with you because this has been on my mind. You know, I love animals, and I would put my life on the line for animals because it's just something that I know they have a soul, I have a spirit, and in some cases they're not able to defend themselves. So I have 4 cats, one that I adopted last year in September, but Noir, who I've had going on just over 17 years, is my buddy. He's a Maine Coon. I had rescued him back in 2008 in Las Vegas. The girlfriend I had at the time, he was a homeless cat. He was on the streets. Someone had abandoned him and just let him go. So he had been living on the streets for almost 2 years. She had been feeding him, and then I took him home. And I've had him since, and he's been by my side since the day I brought him home. So every day I work, when I sit here, he's by my side. So to have that friendship, and my buddy, and as people that have pets know, they become family. Well, a year ago in March, he suffered from heart arrhythmia and syncope episodes where he was collapsing, which we found out going to several doctors, that his heart would pause anywhere from 7 to 14 seconds, causing him to completely blank out. And this started getting progressively worse, where it was happening every 15 minutes. So we had put him on medication for a period of time that worked all the way until December. It stopped working, and he was collapsing again, so then we put him on another medication. And that was working for a period of time. And then this year, starting, I believe, in the end of June and early July, he started having further collapses. And it was happening every 10 minutes, 15 minutes, but then he was sometimes collapsing 3 times within 10 minutes. Horrific to watch, horrific to go through, because what do you do? And I was told last year the only option was to do this medication or get a pacemaker. And unfortunately, there's no further medication for him. The pacemaker was the only option. And it's expensive. It's anywhere between $7,000 to $10,000. So I didn't have the money. And when this happened in July, which was a week before I put on this paranormal pop-up Paracon, which was a Paracon I decided to do within 3-4 months before as a last-minute thing, because and it became a huge undertaking, but it was very successful. We had 13 speakers and just over 28 vendors, which we sold out the vendors. And we ended up having 300 people that came through the door. There was 240 tickets that were pre-sold before the event, and then 60 walk-ins occurred on the day of the event. So I'm very pleased with the result of that. But Noir started collapsing just 2 weeks before this event. And then I had another event at Indiana State Sanitarium a week after, or a week or two after the pop-up Paracon. So it was so stressful for me. But what's the point of me bringing this up? Because this is an emotional thing. Is I was told by the cardiologist it's either pacemaker or you have to put him down. So it was a tough decision to take care of all these responsibilities that I had at the time, as well as my clients that I do Monday through Wednesday, and try to put my emotional thing to the side and making that decision. So it was tough. But I remember coming back from going to Indiana, and I realized I had to make a decision. I had to put him down, or I had to figure out a way I could get the pacemaker. And I remember going to Indiana Sanitarium. So I'm not going to let this bother me and then take away from me enjoying this event and being there and hosting this event for all the people. There were 60 people. The event sold out. So I made sure that everybody had a wonderful time, and we all did. On the drive home, I realized that, I pray to God that Noir is still alive, but I had to make a decision within 24 hours. And I know my mom and having this conversation, she's like, you can't afford this. This is a lot of money. You've gone through a lot over the past couple of years. You can't put yourself in this situation. It's time. And I'm like, I just didn't feel it was. So I said to the universe, and we've talked about this in other podcasts, where you just surrender. You say to the universe, you ask them for advice. I said, God, if I'm to put him to sleep, if that's the best decision, then let me see a billboard or license plate that says Noir or black, because Noir in French means black. So I'm driving, and Alex Felix, my buddy, was with me. We were driving, and he says, you want me to drive? I said, no, I'm going to drive. I needed to drive to take my mind off it. So we're driving home, which is about a 3.5-hour drive. And I'm looking everywhere. I'm looking at license plate. I'm looking at billboards, and I'm not seeing anything. We stop at a stop off, and there's a vending machine, and Alex goes to use the restroom, and I'm like, you know what, I'm going to get some gummy bears or something. I'm kind of craving it. So put money in there, and out comes a quarter for change for $2. And one quarter comes out after a $2 input. And I looked at the quarter, in the back of the quarter, and it had a drummer on it, a military drummer. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. You might be asking, well, why am I paying attention to a quarter? Why am I looking at a quarter? Because quarters have been popping up after some of these events that I've been doing with significant images that are reflecting upon something that's going on. And what happened that morning is Alex and a whole bunch of other people, we had stayed inside one of the commercial buildings at Indiana Sanatorium. We spent the night in there instead of getting a hotel. Alex told me when he woke up in the morning, there was a quarter that was on the middle of his bed. And I'm like, did you have change? He goes, no, it was just right there in the middle of the bed. I said, what did it say? He says, well, it said my birthday, which was like in the 1970s. And I go, well, that's out of all the different years to have, and that's probably out of circulation. I mean, that's pretty interesting. He's like, what does it mean? I go, I'll tell you what it means. Because we spent a lot last night talking to the spirits, respectively, and we even helped and prayed for them, and we're kind to them. That's their way of gratitude. They're giving you a message from gratitude. How do I know this? Because other events I've had, quarters were left or showed up out of the blue that had a specific image related to what we discussed the night before with the spirits. So I believe this was their way of saying, thank you, Alex, for your kindness and your compassion towards us last night, because Alex did say some prayers and said some wonderful things to the spirits. So he was all excited about that, and as well as some of the paranormal stuff we had happen that night. So I reflect back on that to let you know that this made me look at the quarter even a little bit more. And I'm like, drummer, okay, what does this mean? I don't know. So I tossed it in my change holder in my car, and we continued to drive. As I'm still scouting license plates and billboards, my eye catches a billboard on the left-hand side, and it was a hospital billboard with a family holding each other. And it said something to the fact that we fight to keep you together longer, basically saying that we try to keep you alive so that you can be with your loved ones and family members and live a long life. And I saw this. It said, fight for your life. And I'm like, wow, that's like Noir, fighting to keep him alive. And that's why I'm asking the universe. So there was one sign with the quarter. There was the second sign with this billboard. I drop Alex off and I get home. And I go into my room and I see Noir, and he's still alive. He's still collapsing. And I hug him and everything. And I decide to unpack. And as I'm done unpacking, I noticed there was a quarter on the floor with the tails up. And I look at it, and there it is again, the drummer. I'm like, wait a minute, I put this in the change holder in my car. So I'm seeing the drummer twice now. And I didn't have any change on me that I thought of. But the fact that this quarter shows up with the same image, there must be something to it. So I looked up the meaning of a drummer, a soldier, and I found it said that drummers would drum during the time of battle to inspire the soldiers and personnel to keep fighting, to not give up. It hit me hard. And I realized that the universe was telling me not to put him to sleep, but to fight for him. And I knew, right there. So I called my mom. I said, Mom, I'm getting a pacemaker. I'm going to fight for him. So when I got up that morning, I was calling all the different hospitals trying to get quotes. I called University of Wisconsin. I knew VSC was really expensive. I mean, they said anywhere between $8,000 to $12,000. Called University of Madison, and at first they gave me this lowball number. I'm like, okay, great. So I told the cardiologist to send over all the documents to them. They were sending it over. I then get an invoice that night from University of Madison, and it was not what they told me earlier that morning. It was way out of my range. I said, oh my God, I can't do this. I remember the one cardiologist telling me about University of Illinois. So I contacted University of Illinois, which was about a 3.5-hour drive away. 3 hours, 3.5. And I reached out to them, and they were significantly lower than VSC. So they were putting it anywhere between $5,000 to $8,000. And I said, okay, I'm just going to go with U of I. I don't know how I'm going to get the money. I'm going to figure it out. I'll do events. I'll sell whatever I can. I'll just, I'm going to do what I need to. I've got to fight for him. So I posted online that I was going to go get the pacemaker. I started telling people that I'm going to do this, on my social media. And several people wrote to me saying, you should do a GoFundMe. And I said, I hate to ask people for money. My friend Susan, just asked for money for my stem cells last year. And I still have that money. It's sitting in an account, but I can't touch that because that's for my stem cells. So I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. But if I'm going to do it, people need to see what he's going through. They need to see pictures of him. They need to see the videos of what's happening to him. So I quickly went and did that, and I put up the GoFundMe. For the first time, I put up my own GoFundMe for my cat. And the next morning, I spoke to U of I. They said, we can get him in here. If you can bring him here the next day, which was Tuesday. I said, yes, I can do that. So, luckily they were able to get me in that quickly. Thank God. So I packed everything up, got Noir out there, met with them. They were wonderful, very, very passionate. They said they were going to hold him for a day and they weren't going to do the surgery till the next day. And they told me because of his condition and his age and everything else, it might take, there's precautions and it could take 4 to 5 hours. So the next day they did it was about almost 5 hours of surgery. Said he did very well. And then after 2 days, they said, there's still a couple concerns. They're watching him. And they said, but if you want to come pick him up, I said, well, let me ask you this. Do you think it's best for you to hold him additionally for a day or two? They said, yes. And I said, okay, please, because I'd be freaking out if not knowing what to do when I'm 3 hours away from the surgeons and stuff and something starts happening. So they kept him for 2 extra days. And then I went and picked him up that Friday, and it was so touching. He was groggy. He was in a lot of pain. His whole underside was cut up, and he turned and looked at me and just dropped his head, as fatigued and as sore and weak as he was, into my hand. And I just broke out into tears. And even the doctor and the assistant, they were like, oh my God, that's so precious that, he's missed you. Well, the one thing I want to share is he's alive today. He's doing very well with his pacemaker. It's at 40% capacity, meaning it's only been used 40% of the time. He is alive today because of all these wonderful people that had come forward and donated in GoFundMe. So I just want to thank you all to let you know how much that means to me. The majority of the money was raised within 24 hours. And, there's still a balance due, not from the surgery. It covered the surgery, the $8,000. There's still balance due from other visits and stuff that I have to do, which is fine. I'm doing what I can to pay that off. But I just wanted to tell everybody, and I told my mom, I said, Mom, see, I told you the universe said they take care of it. They said to fight. And here we are. He's alive. It's taken care of. The surgery's been paid for. And, the rest of the doctor visits and everything else, I can now, tackle and do what I can to just try to pay for that. But the fact of the matter is, he's with us today. And I will never stop sharing my gratitude for everybody that contributed, everybody that sent prayers, and was there to support myself as well as Noir. So as emotional as this is, and I know we got a podcast to do, I had to tell you that in dealing with this the past few months and in this year and other stuff has been tough. Even though I know he has a soul and a spirit, I am so attached to him, and he's done so much for me that it meant a lot. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. We'll be right back. Got some wonderful news a few months ago from one of the producers from The Curse of the Lizzie Borden documentary that we did, the Shock documentary that we did for Discovery. The show won a Gold Telly Award. The production company won a Gold Telly Award for Best Television General Horror category. This is extraordinary, and it's fantastic. And I just want to say, everybody involved, congratulations. And I know I became a part of this thing last minute, like a week before. Dave Schrader had called me and said, hey, listen, we need someone. You're the perfect person, to jump aboard on this investigation. Would you like to do it? I said, yeah, I've been wanting to go back there for 10 years. So it is great to be a part of a project and been doing this for so long, 23 years doing paranormal TV, to receive an award for everybody's contributions to something that we love and that we're very passionate about. So I just wanted to share that The Curse of Lizzie Borden Shock Doc for Discovery won a Gold Telly Award for Best Television General Horror category. So congratulations, everybody, and woohoo! Right? Okay. Now, since I've shared some of this stuff with you guys, the other news is Spooked Ireland, the second season from the Spooked Scotland and Haunted Scotland series will be airing in the UK the end of September, which is the end of this month. Is going to start airing on Really Channel. It'll probably be dropping then also on Discovery Plus in the UK, and it won't be in the USA market until next year. Do not know the date. They've not told us, but it's on the schedule for sometime in 2024. Okay? So I just want to share that with you. But let's get to some of these questions regarding psychic abilities. Is when it comes to a sixth sense and psychic abilities, what questions do you have? I'm going to read off some of these questions and answer them for you. Like, here's one. Why do psychics on paranormal TV shows still jump and become frightened when they see physical things manifest when they already know and sense they're there? It's simple. We're human, and we still get startled, okay? It's no different than you're hanging out with a bunch of your friends and you walk down a hallway and your buddy jumps out. Because it's very rare that a spirit or ghost makes actual physical contact or does some type of physical reaction within the environment, such as knocking something over, closing a door, or banging on a wall, or touching you. So we always know that there's this distance from the dimension. So when something like that happens, sometimes we can feel it coming and sometimes we don't. We're surprised. So it's just being startled. It's very simple. It's a humanistic trait. And that question was from David O'Keefe. So thank you, David. Now here's another interesting question. I used to live in a 100-year-old house, and one room had a lot of dead bees. Does that have the same meaning as dead flies? And this is by Worker B12345, Jack username. Well, what's interesting about this, and some paranormal investigators don't understand this, don't believe this, but if you look at certain negative entity cases, and this goes all the way back to Ed and Lorraine Warren, they've dealt with these types of cases as well. For some reason, flies and sometimes even bees, can congregate on one section of the house near a windowsill or a wall. And what we have found, what I've also found in my own personal cases, is that usually means there's an entity there and there's an infestation. And because of this infestation, it is manifesting into the physical reality. We had one case in California where all these flies were on one side of the wall. And they were like zombie flies. You can grab them by the wings and pick them off. And it was like, what? They weren't even moving. And some of them were not moving at all, but they're still alive. And some were moving very slowly, but would not fly away or race away when you go to touch them. It's almost like they were being controlled by something else. We had this in multiple locations in the UK, doing Out My House is Haunted. And even on a season during Haunted Scotland, there were some flies or bees that were congregating into a certain area. And Barry Guy and I used to talk about this, like, oh my God, we got an infestation. Here's what's going on. So there is a supernatural meaning behind that usually is that you have an entity there. Does it have the same meaning as dead flies? Yes, it does. So within that house, that's telling you that there's some type of spirit or entity that's there, and the ether, the environment, is being affected by their presence. If you get rid of the entity, do a cleansing, most likely flies and these bees will go away. Now, of course, you can have a beehive or an issue that is attracting insects with a natural reason. But when they're inside the house and congregating on one specific wall, then you know there's a pattern. There's some type of magnetic pull that is bringing them to just that particular spot. And usually that means the entity's close by. Here's an interesting question from MMUZEY. Has anyone ever taken advantage of or used you for your abilities? If so, how should someone handle the situation? Yeah, this girl I know calls up all the time, says she needs advice and this and that. I said, why don't you just book a session? She goes, well, I know you. I said, yeah, but I know I'm busy. I have time. You can't just always call me up asking for advice. Now, I do that for a lot of my friends, but when you don't hear from them for a long time and they only call up for that, it's kind of like they're kind of using you. So you have to, create certain standards with your friends and with people that, hey, it's like a doctor where you're constantly going to the doctor for free because he's your friend. Some doctors will do that, but some doctors I can't keep doing that. I've got a career and I've got clients. So they do what they can. So it's the same thing. But, someone taking advantage of your abilities, I haven't seen too much of that, honestly. So it's not really a concern of mine. If you have someone handling that, you have to set a certain standard. Here's the rules. I've had people where I've done readings for them, and I've done 1 or 2 readings. All of a sudden, they're messaging me, calling all the time, continuing to ask me questions. I've told people, sure, if you got a question after your session, let me know. But when they're doing that consistently for months, for weeks, whatever it is, it's like, hey, I've got other clients and stuff. If I did this with everybody, I couldn't see any new clients. So your session's ended, and if you continue to have more questions, set up another session. So that's basically, you have to set the ground rules. Here's a good question. This is from Miss Bookwriter, underscores in between the words. She was based around believing in psychics. What is your opinion about psychics who claim to pick up what is historically incorrect, like something based on myths or urban legends, but research shows it's 100% wrong? No, not referring to anything you've done. Well, thank you. I did watch a show not too long ago when the investigators shared what turned out to be 100% fallacy, and then the psychic who claimed to know nothing about the location sensed the same fallacies. Could a psychic mistake a myth for truth? Okay, that's 2 questions in one. Can a psychic mistake a myth for truth? I don't believe so. I believe if that you are an accurate psychic, you're going to pick out on what you pick up that is in that environment or what the spirits are telling you. If you're picking up a myth or untruth, then I would believe that's something that you picked up from someone talking about it, and you're picking up on that. You've overheard it and you're throwing it into your reading. Now, the other question you had is psychics who claim to pick up what is historically incorrect. Well, here's the one thing that I've noticed. Can you pick up on stuff that's incorrect? Sure, I guess, if you get assumptions. But what I have found is that you should be picking up on stuff that is is accurate, but history does not have all the details. So you could pick up stuff that has not been documented but happened. And what's interesting is I had picked up on certain things over the last 20 years on some of the investigations I've gone to where historians or someone there says, well, we don't know anything about that. And then you find out later they do. And they're like, oh my God, how did you know this? Because then it gets revealed to them later on. Or I remember Salmoneo, he was killed. He was a friend of James Dean when we were doing the Dead Famous episode. And I remember we were in California near West Hollywood. And I went down this little alleyway where he was murdered, was picking up on how he was murdered and the emotions and him calling out and then crawling. I saw him crawling on his elbows away from where he was actually stabbed. And I saw him go out into a back street where there's like kind of a parking area, but a back street after that alley. And I said, he kept crawling for help, and I see him on his side, and there must be blood being spread out on the concrete because I see him end up over here. Well, there was a historian that was there, that was a writer that also wrote about James Dean, and he had photographs that he had not shown to us yet. He says, well, that's not accurate. And he said that that Salmoneo's body was actually right here. I said, I can't be wrong because I'm feeling this. I said, no. I go, well, I'm telling you, what I'm getting is his body's was right over here. So the guy goes, well, I got the photograph. He pulls out the photograph. It's a black and white photograph from the police department or detectives when they took pictures of the body, and they had the tarp over it. And he goes, look, see, here's it is. I go, no, look, here's the edge of the garage that's here, and here's the little alleyway. Look at the distance. And there's oh my God, look, there's the darkness on the concrete. That's the blood of him dragging. His body's over here. So he looks at the photograph, he looks at the space, looks where I'm pointing. He's like, oh my God, you're right. It matched up to what I was saying. He's like, how did you know that? I go, because I just picked up on his place memory and what's recorded here, he was telling me. And the guy was in complete amazement. So I raced back to kind of tell people, and, it's like, all right, big deal, who cares, right? But for him, it just gave an additional detail that he had missed. So sometimes that happens. Like we were in the UK going to certain castles and stuff. I was picking up on stuff that there was nothing historically that we had known about or we had discovered at that time, okay, during their research, is there was nothing pulled up about it. But here I was getting this Black Knight that was telling me he served the laird. He collected all the money and stuff from people within the farms. And he died there, and his girlfriend was killed too. And his soul is restless because of it. And I had this long, emotional conversation with him. He said, well, we don't have any record of that. I go, well, I'm telling you, he's here. There's a part of history that is either wiped away or not discovered yet, or people just don't talk about it. So you're going to get this stuff that, even though history may not have it documented, does not mean it did not happen. But then sometimes you get additional information that adds on to history that is significant. So your question is, what is my opinion about psychics who claim to pick up what is historically incorrect? Well, I don't really personally gauge other psychics, and I'm not familiar with any that have stated stuff that was untrue and this and that, because I don't really pay attention to that. Not to be selfish or anything like that, I just pay attention to the places I go and the information that is revealed to me. So, that's it. And I'll give you this one other thing. We were at Braddock Castle, and if you've seen the opening scene on Haunted Scotland, Spooked Scotland, is we're walking up the steps, and Evelyn says something, Gail says something, and I say something about all these deer and elk heads that are all over the wall. I mean, it was horrific. There were so many of them. And I got angry, like, how could they do that? How could they kill these animals? How could they go there trophy hunting and put the heads up? On my recorder, when I played it back and was analyzing the audio, a spirit says, no, it all was for food. So I had this interpretation that they were doing it for sport and just killing all these animals and putting their heads on the wall. But then a spirit says, no, back in that time, this was all the food source. So all these deer were killed, but all the meat was used and stored to get through the winter and for a food source. They weren't killed at all for sport. It was just for food. So I was corrected to let me know it was basically survival. And that was an interesting thing to get because my perception was different. but the spirit had corrected me in saying, no, that's not the issue. So I find that fascinating. When we do paranormal TV, you will sometimes have the production company or an assistant that will do historical research, right? They don't share that stuff with me because when I walk in there, I want to pick up whatever I pick up. Unless that type of show is like we're just getting right to the point, we're not doing where you're doing a sweep, then they share some of the information with us. And then my job is to come in contact with those particular spirits. And if they're not there, find out who else is there. Because we've been at locations that history has a ghost story that this particular spirit's there. We go there, well, guess what? That spirit is not there. There's someone else, and that spirit's gone a long time ago, or people have been misidentifying, thinking it's this particular person in history, and it's not. It's someone else. So sometimes producers, they let you share who it is, and sometimes they don't. But for me, it's like, hey, if I'm getting this particular spirit, I'm going to tell you who I'm getting. I'm not going to tell you somebody in history that this person's there if they're not there and they're not communicating with me. So I think it's important, out of respect as a psychic, but also to the location and the other spirits are there, that you must be honest. And if you get in touch with one spirit, then that's who you get in touch with. If you don't get in touch with this historical ghost story, then you just don't. It's just the way it is. Okay, here's a question from Taryn, Cats 3, and then spelled out 3. Have you ever had your brain waves monitored while doing a reading? Would be interesting to see if your brain waves move into alpha, theta, or delta pattern. Well, 2 things I can share. Well, there's actually 3 things. Is 1, I had gotten a QEEG done of my brain several years ago, and it showed various areas that were over amplified and certain areas that weren't. And in working with this neurologist, this neuroscientist that was doing the QEEG, he shared with me various stuff about psychics and how certain areas are amplified and other areas aren't. Like, for example, one part of my brain between 10 to 14 hertz was over amplified, meaning that frequencies within that range I was able to pick up. Well, when you look at 10 to 14 hertz, if we talk about hearing, we don't hear below 20 hertz. So this is telling me that any frequency within that 10 to 14, my brain, not necessarily my hearing, but my brain is sensitive to that. So that's extraordinary. We didn't get into any other research involving my abilities, and I wasn't monitored specifically for those abilities. But I did the Global Consciousness software program. Adam Bly was there, and so was John Zaffis when we were at Stanley Hotel. They had it set up to where it was just neutral, and they asked me to walk into the room. I walked into the room, and all of a sudden, it spiked up. It reacted to my presence. And in doing so, they asked me, can you make it go up even more? I said, yeah. So here I am looking at the software, and I'm telling it to go up, and it's not going up. I'm like, it's not moving. So then I closed my eyes, and I started to connect with my higher self, as well as asking spirit guides and spirits to come forward. Then all of a sudden, it shot up, and Adam Bly was blown away. He's like, oh my God, look at it. Look at it. It keeps going up, keeps going up, keeps going up. And it was breaking any type of random pattern. They then asked me to leave the room, and when I left the room, it went back to neutral. This was the global consciousness, meaning that my consciousness, while connecting with spirits, was affecting the software program. Extraordinary. Bill Murphy, a good friend of mine, who was on the show Fact or Faked, Paranormal Files, he had, when we were doing a seance, we had a Ouija board. He had used some various pieces of equipment, and I can't remember exactly everything that he had. One of them also was a spectral camera that was taking a look at any temperature changes and changes in electromagnetic field. During the seance, and I started connecting with the spirit, he saw my hands change temperature dramatically, as if something was starting to take over a certain part of my body. And I think he took a picture or 2 of it. He told me afterwards that was happening. This was fascinating. As you were connecting with the spirit and you're saying it was starting to enter into you, we saw the changes on the camera as it was happening. So, that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the brain waves, but it had to do with temperature changes, and my body was being affected by it. I would like to, and I don't know who to talk to specifically, would be to have something hooked up to my head and my brain and go into a certain state of consciousness of communication to see what type of readings they get on the monitor and what that data means. I think that would be extraordinary. I have yet to do that. This next question, I like this one. This is from Abraham Cush. What can we do to connect with our spirit guides? This is a fantastic question, and I know a lot of psychics talk about this. There may be different ways for you to connect, okay? For me, it was because I came from a strong religious background, and I went to church. I was an altar boy. I prayed. My dad was Catholic. My mom was Catholic, so I went to a Catholic school, and because of prayer, I had connections, some really nice divine spiritual connections, where I saw my spirit guides when I was a little kid. At a certain time when I was lost, another time when I was in some sense of danger, they appeared. So for me, it was just always natural. And as I got older, and then I started going into doing readings and doing counseling for people, I needed to connect with their guides as well as other guides up there in the council, spirit council, that is associated with the life purpose of that particular person. How did I communicate with them? Well, because I always knew there was a relationship there, I knew that I had to do a couple things. And the one thing that I found to be the most important thing is your intent. Because we're all connected to the absolute, we're all connected to the Creator, our soul, our spirit, our life force that is in us is already connected to our higher self, our consciousness. We are an extension of that is having an experience there. And we're connected, just like the universe says, all things in the universe, all points in time, are connected throughout the universe. Spooky distance, entanglement, and all that. So our consciousness is the same way because we come from the source. So we are already connected, but we're in a frequency and vibration in the third dimension, limited by time, space, and gravity, that cancels out those connections or recognition of those connections in the frequency because we have to have a unique experience at one particular channel and not be distracted by all these other channels. So what do you do? Well, one, you need to have the intent. What's your intent? Why do you want to communicate? What are you doing it for? Can't you do it for yourself? You have to do it for others. So when you're stating that I'm doing this for other people, I'm doing this to share, to bring this information to them as well as to myself, then it's multi-connected. And because it's multi-connected, then you have a greater chance of succeeding and connecting with that. The other thing is, just like meditation, a form of prayer. You must quiet your mind down. You state your intent of why you're doing this. You also surrender. You ask. Ask and you shall receive. You ask the guides. You ask the universe, which is a collaboration of all of them, loved ones, family members, friends, spirit guides, angels, you name it. You ask to collaborate with all of them to bring honest and truthful information. So you must set the ground rules. You must set why you're doing this. You must establish who you're doing it for and how you're going to contribute. Okay, very similar to the major definite purpose. Because if it's just a selfish or egotistical thing, they're not going to help you. But if it's to help someone else, then there you go. Now, also having a greater understanding of spirit guides is that these are teachers, all right? They're enlightened teachers that are the mediator between the Creator and you. They've seen many lives that you've had. They assist you in between the lives in the dream state. Most of the time you don't remember it. But they definitely assist you in between lives. When you pass away and before you cross over again into this realm, anytime in between, as well as multiple lives you're having simultaneously. For you to achieve and obtain higher understanding, experience, and recognition of what it's like to experience all these multitude of creativity and emotions. So the spirit guides want you to achieve that so you become one to the greater understanding and intelligence of the Creator to get to that level. So the spirit guides are here to help you recognize that. They don't judge you. They ask you, what do you think? How do you think you did? What about this? What about that? They don't tell you exactly what to do. They can't, because the law of the universe of us in this realm is free will. We have to choose, but they can guide us. They can give us some advice, but we have to choose whether we're going to do it or not. And they do have boundaries. They can't go too far because they can't affect our decisions. They can inspire and give us choices, but there's certain ways we have to ask. So we can say, I'm using my free will to surrender and give you permission to give me some signs or messages to help me make a better decision, because here's what I would like to accomplish and here's why and how it's important. So when you state something like that, they can at times help you with certain imagery, messages, signs, inspirations, and it can come in any way, in the physical realm or even in the dream state. So, as I've shared with your question, what can we do to connect with our spirit guides? Intent, prayer, focus, also intelligence of recognizing we're always connected to them. They're always aware of what we're thinking and we're doing. We are just not always aware because we're in a three-dimensional realm that cancels out that frequency of connection. So, and when we ask for something from them, there must be not only for ourselves, but a contribution also towards others or to the totality of why we're doing it. Okay? So what do? Well, find a quiet room, sit down, focus on calming yourself, start to connect with your higher self, and state your intent. And then also use your free will by giving permission, saying, I'm giving permission to my holy guiding spirit guides to come forth into my life, both into my conscious and subconscious, to assist me with making the right decision that will benefit not only myself, but also others, to obtain a greater understanding of this reality, but to also perfect their destiny and their path, as well as my own. There you go. Thank you for that question. And the next question, let's see, what do we got here? Botlin Bimbo, ex-lovely lady luck at Twitter. How do I see more but stop being so afraid of what I see? I've locked so much of it away out of fear. Okay, well, fear is the biggest factor here. The question is what are you afraid of? I don't know what you're afraid of. But when people have said to me over the years, I'm really afraid. How do I see more? Well, listen, what are you afraid of? That's the problem, is you need to address what the fear is. Is it because of something negative you saw? Well, then you need to work on protection. You need to believe in yourself, believe that you're connected to the source, the creator, and you need to learn protection techniques. When it comes to psychic abilities, what is it you're afraid of? I had some people say, I hate my psychic abilities, or I don't like it because I'm always getting negative stuff that's happening. Okay, so you're getting negative stuff that's happening, which means that you have this protection sensory that is preparing you for the worst or preparing you for something that's going to occur. Now, what can happen is, if it's a major event, most likely it can't be changed because it involves a lot of people. But if it's only singular and it's only representing you that something's going to happen, then it's teaching you that you need to prepare and you need to respond most likely in a different way. And what do I mean by that is, well, sometimes when we have these premonitions or precognitions, we can change it if we react differently. What do? You take that vision, you take that image, and you play it over and over again. And then you step back and you look at, what do I want the outcome to be? Or how do I want to respond to that? What is the best way to respond to that? And then you look at that. So sometimes when we get psychic abilities or things, and I can understand too, say in a relationship, and you get this sensation, this feeling that the person is cheating on you, or that you totally feel that something's wrong. Well, most likely there probably is something wrong. So what you need to do is say, okay, well, it's protecting me even though I don't like it. There's the fear. I don't want to be hurt. There's the fear. I don't want to be disrespected. I don't want to be sad. I don't want to be depressed. I don't want to be alone. There's all the fear. Well, that's actually irrelevant, because what's happening here is your higher self is saying, this isn't good for you. So you can't be afraid of it. You have to realize that, hey, this is not serving me. What is it I'm really afraid of? Afraid of being alone, codependent, afraid of being hurt? Well, then sometimes you have to step up and you have to grow. It can be a teaching instrument for you too. So when someone says, though, how do I see more? Like I want to see more ghosts. And I'm afraid, well, that means you've probably seen something negative. So what you have to do is once again go back to protection, and you have to state the intent. I would like to see you, and I've done that. I mean, when I was a little kid, I used to, see in the darkness and in the shadows, and I realized that I could look to where the moonlight is, then I could look to the darkest corner of the room. Then if I looked in between that gradation between light and dark, and I focused on that, I would start to see things moving around. Why? Well, it's because of the spectrum, the visual spectrum. And the light that's slightly out of the spectrum coming in from the moonlight or whatever other light source would bounce off of what's there, and I'd be able to pick it up. And I've done that in my house I'm in now a few years ago. Me, I choose not to most of the time. It's like, I want to go to bed. I don't want to see anything. I know you're here. Don't need to see you. But I've done it where I've sat there in my room and all of a sudden I start seeing stuff fly around. I'm like, oh my God, I'm seeing stuff fly around again, just like I did when I was a kid. But that has to do with the fear, overcoming the fear, and realize that you're just important, just as significant as these spirits and these entities. So it's easy for me to say because I've been through it all. But if you want to see more, you must conquer the fear. And what is the fear? You must identify that, you must confront it, and you must evolve to a higher sense of being. Now, here's an interesting question that I think many of you may be able to relate to, and I know I have as well. This comes from Harlow Dane. And curious about an ear sensation I've always had, a slight rush or opening up feeling. Always expect a voice to reveal secrets of the universe, but so far, just a sensation, not a medical issue. Well, not a medical issue, we throw that in there. If that's the case, we could be dealing with something else. But I do want to state two things, because having played football, got concussions, had a head injury, neck issues, there tend to be pressure changes that go on within the eardrums, within the neck, where pressure can build up depending upon the fluid, depending upon the crystals within your ears. You can have sometimes these popping sensations or these slight rush feelings, even, of course, the ringing in the ear. So those tend to be more of a physical thing and a medical issue. However, I've had where I'm awoken up by this distortion, this crazy distortion that is in one ear that it hurts so bad. I'm like, what the hell was that? I equate that to coming back into my body, not being in the right frequency and bypassing some type of distortion that's in the environment or interdimensionally. The other thing is, yes, that rushing sound like whoosh, right? Had that. In some of the instances that I've had that, I believe that to be my soul coming back into the body because I was traveling. That's pretty interesting. As well as if you astral travel, you go somewhere and then you come back. And I do believe, if this is correct, that Robert Monroe used to talk about this while he was creating the program for the Gateway in some of his books. I don't know if it's called Journey of Souls or something like that. He talked about some of these sensations, these rush feelings. So I believe that's probably what it was. If you're saying here, always expect a voice to reveal secrets of the universe, but so far just a sensation. Well, most likely it's you that's traveling through the universe or through the astral travel that is having that experience. Okay, then this question, Goblin Watch Network, Goblin Watch Net, okay, asks, can you talk to goblins? I don't think I've ever had anybody ask that question in my entire life. Let's break down the word goblins. Goblins, are we talking about imps? Are we talking about elementals? Elves? These types of things? Okay. If we're talking about imps, these negative entities, can you talk to them? Yes. Why would you want to? You don't want to talk to them. They're negative, okay? Yes, I have spoken to them. Yes, through ITC, when they've been in my house, come out of the closet, when I've seen them, when a black mass is shot across the room, when I've investigated homes that are infested with them. Yes, I've confronted them. Multiple times. Caught them on the Spirit Box, ITC apps, and EVP. Have had eyewitnesses, other investigators, as well as groups of people during some of my paranormal access events. They've spoken and we've talked to them. not talking to them because we want to be entertained or have a conversation, but talk to them because we've stated, hey, you're not welcome. You should not be here. And we've tried to do cleansing that help spirits that are there that don't want them there. So when you say goblins, what type of goblin are you talking about? Talking about elementals? Then we get into the elemental realm. Then yes, in Ireland, in Scotland, several locations, other places we've been to. We were just at Indiana Sanatorium in Indiana and Sanitarium. And there we were coming in contact with elementals. And the craziest thing was they were saying there was, believe it or not, okay, if you were there, you would experience this. Someone had a Spectrum camera. So we had it faced on the road. And the ITC device was stating elves. I'm like, come on. All right, there's elves here? Really? If there is, show yourself. All of a sudden, you see this thin, narrow figure race across the road into the bushes. This was just in July. And we're all like, oh my God, did you see that? Are you filming this? No. Oh my God, you're not filming this? We just saw this. So I believe elementals exist. There's no doubt about it. To me, I've had enough experiences. If anybody else was saying this and I didn't have an experience, you're right. I would think they're crazy. I would think, okay, come on, making this up, whatever it might be. Until you've had the experience, then you can understand. So any skeptics listening to this, fully understand. I support based on your perception and not having this type of experience to be skeptical. Totally support you on that because I used to be skeptical as well until I've had not just one, not just two, but multiple experiences where I've seen physically, okay, but also where we've communicated with various forms of ITC. So to me, this is fascinating and a completely untapped realm within the paranormal that I think we need to pursue more because they're there. And, I could say more about it. We can do a whole episode, and we have done episodes with Kate talking about elementals, but that's for another time. So thank you. Next question. And this is from Debbie J. On Twitter. My question would be, what is it actually like to have a psychic ability? Do you ever get a moment when being contacted the spirits without being contacted by the spirits? Or is it just something that's always part of your day-to-day life? Well, I guess it's focus and perception. I mean, if I'm doing some artwork or I'm talking to somebody, if I'm watching a movie or whatever, I'm not thinking about spirits. There's been times that I am doing something very constructive or creative that I get interrupted. Feel something passes by, those types of things. But it's not, and I really don't even like to use the word psychic and ability. I think it's just a higher consciousness and awareness of being tapped into it. But we, of course, call it psychic, and an ability. I think we all have a higher consciousness. We all are capable of doing this in our spiritual form. It's just many people have either more or less access to it. Okay, let's just call it we have access to this natural ability we have in our full spiritual form. So yeah, there's a lot of moments that I don't deal with it because I'm not focusing on it. And there's sometimes where if I go to bed and there's a place, oh my God, haunted places I've stayed at or we've investigated, things follow us home, they're at the hotel or whatever, and I'm like, I got to go to bed. I don't have time for this, so I just shut it off. So that's what you do. Is it always part of your day-to-day life? Pretty much. This is a really good question. And I know there's a lot of people that have gone through the same thing. So I do want to bring this up. This is from Amanda, which is BOOGAHBLU on Twitter. How does one turn their sixth sense back on? I was seeing spirits, then one scared me, and I must have, it's funny, she says, I must have shit it down. I'm sure you meant to say shut it down, but haven't seen any since. Totally could relate to this. All through grade school, horrific things were happening with negative entities. Kicked them out. They were gone. Didn't want to deal with it anymore. Then went to high school. Completely different reality shift. Going to high school, being a freshman, and all these other upperclassmen. Scary situation at first. Getting into football, playing sports, girls. Becoming familiar with girls. Being attracted to them. Guys talking about it, and then of course getting into art and studying. Dealing with more difficult subject matters. In that particular situation, because your world has changed, for me, it was like I didn't pay attention as much to the ghosts in our house. Some things still happen, but I tend to just kind of ignore it because at that point I didn't want to deal with it anymore. Then, get into college, talked about it a little bit with some kids, at school, had some experiences, then out of school, obviously did some investigating here and there and had some encounters, off and on, even in some relationships, early relationships, later relationships. So there was always that sixth sense. And when we talk about sixth sense, the sixth sense can represent seeing spirits, but then also getting the precognition, the intuition, and the psychic abilities, having that sense beyond your normal senses. So I was always having dreams that would come true. Football, guys, I got a feeling this weekend that we're gonna do like a Hail Mary, and Sean, you're gonna catch it, and we're gonna win. And it happened. And I talked about it on one of my videos on YouTube, I believe. And it happened just as I said. So that was in college. So it was always there. But as I got older, because I wasn't utilizing it, I kind of shut it off and didn't want to deal with it. When I did the very first episode of Dead Famous in 2003, being asked to do a seance. Well, I hadn't done seances in years. Probably the last seance I had done before that. Well, I did do one in the mid-90s. There was one in 99 that I was a part of. But to have this documented and on camera, I was not wanting to do it because I was afraid, what if I failed? I remember Charlotte said to me, okay, you have to lead this seance and talk to Marilyn Monroe. I go, what do you mean? I don't want to do the seance. I don't want to, well, that's why you're on the show. I said, yeah, but if I don't do it, she goes, well, you have to come in contact with Marilyn Monroe. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, wait a minute, we got another psychic here. I'm going to pass it over to him. I'm going to have him do it because I don't want to do it, So I bring everybody into the room. I do a little prayer, protection circle for everybody. And I just start saying, I see someone coming forward. And Michael, do you see the woman too? Right? And all of a sudden he takes off. He takes off with it, starts communicating with her. And I'm like, oh, I'm free and clear. I can just sit back and let him do it. Let him take all the criticism. Let him mess up or let him communicate. I'm just going to sit back here. Right? Well, Spirit had other ideas for me. They were not going to have it. As we are sitting there at this table in California with some people that, loved Marilyn Monroe, wanted to come in contact with her, we're all holding hands while we're going through this seance, I feel this hand come down on mine. And I open my eyes and look, and I'm looking at the woman next to me whose hand I'm holding. And she looks at me, she goes, do you feel that? I said, oh my God, there's a hand that's on both of our hands. She goes, yes. I'm like, holy cow. So I'm like, all right, just close your eyes. Let's try to figure out who this is. And then all of a sudden I start getting poked in the left cheek. And I thought maybe it was the producer, the director, or a cameraman wanting something. So I open up my eyes and I look, and obviously I look up and there's nobody there, but then I look down to my left and there is a little girl ghost. She wasn't alone. Behind her were all these other spirits. But I couldn't take my eye off of her. Like, the last thing I expected was to have a child ghost here at the seance. And I looked at her, and she looked at me with such a compassionate face. She says, Chris, we're here. We've always been here. But you decided not to talk to us. Don't be afraid. And I'm like, oh my God. I started crying. Because I had bottled it up and held it in for so many years after what went on in our house, the ridicule, criticism I got from certain people, even in college. Oh man, he believes in ghosts, that builds up over a period of time. And the last thing I wanted to do was be criticized again and embarrassed. The producer comes over, sees me crying, obviously doesn't see the ghost that I see. And she goes, what's wrong? Why are you crying? And I said, well, these ghosts are talking to me and they're telling me everything's okay. She goes, well, all right, we'll talk about it. Tell everybody at the table what you're experiencing. So from then on, I knew everything was going to be okay. So to answer your question, how does one turn their sixth sense back on? It's not turning it off or on. It's your fear. It's your worry. It's your not wanting to deal with it. It's your ignoring it. That's what does it. Now, look, I can equate this to playing sports. I've played sports. I've done some incredible things playing sports that I look back and go, how did I do that? Right? It's because I believed. And I would not take failure. I said, there's no way I'm not going to fail. I'm going to score this touchdown. I'm going to do this. And you accomplish just incredible athletic feats. And then there's times where I keep dropping the ball. Why am I dropping the ball? I suck. This is terrible. I keep dropping the ball. My coach says, what's wrong? I said, I keep dropping the ball. He says, why are you dropping the ball? I don't know. He goes, yeah, you do. I go, no, I don't. He goes, yeah, you want to know why? I go, why? Because you keep thinking about it. What? I looked at him like he's crazy. I said, no, I can't catch right now. He says, there you go. That's why you're dropping the ball. He goes, this is what I want you to do. All right? When that ball's thrown to you next, and this was in practice, he goes, I want you to imagine that that is an atomic bomb or that's a bomb. And if it hits the ground, everybody here is going to die. Right? I'm like, what? That's what I want you to think of. So next thing you know, the quarterback throws the ball, and the ball was a little short. So I dove to catch it, and I caught it. And I hit the ground, got the wind knocked out of me a little bit. But it was like, oh my God, I caught it. So next thing you know, I kept catching every one because it was perception. It was belief. And that's my point. And what I learned in sports, a lot of you don't know, I played, 15 years of sports. My dad was a hockey player. And what I learned from one of my coaches in high school, which was amazing, is he said 80% of sports is all mental. My God, he's right. Now, it helps to have talent. It helps to have ability. But I've seen people that don't have much ability become incredible and do incredible jobs playing sports. And I've seen people that have incredible talent just be terrible because they're just not into it and they're not using their mental capacity within that environment. So, how do you turn your sixth sense back on? You just use it. It's always there. It's not losing it. It's not turning it off, not turning it on. It's just becoming aware of it and realizing, okay, I'm going to concentrate on it now. And then if you're scared, there's fear. Sure, you're afraid to see something. But, when you open up that door, there are going to things that come through and you just have to face it. But like I said earlier, you face it with a protection. You say, hey, you don't have permission. I don't want to talk to you. I want to talk to you. When I did Psychic Kids, I remember Bryson and even one of the other kids says, they were terrified that they'd wake up at night and there'd be a ghost standing there and they'd be afraid. I said, why are you afraid? Because it's a ghost and this and that. I said, did you ask it what it wants? No, because I was afraid to. I go, okay, so the ghost is not scary. It's your fear that is making it scary. I said, when a ghost appears and it shows itself, ask a question. Ask it, what do you want? It's that simple. You're afraid of something. The ghost might just want to say hi. It might need your help. You don't know. Ask it a question. Next thing you know, he tells me, oh my God, a ghost was there. You're right. I asked it a question and it just smiled. Okay, then that means it just wanted to be acknowledged. It was just saying, hey, I know you can see me. I want you to see me. And that's it. It's fear. Fear is the biggest thing you have to overcome. Ava Dubinsky, hopefully I said that correct, says, how do I make my communication stronger with spirits because I've had a psychic medium gift since I was 8 years old? Great question. How do you make it stronger? Well, there's many other techniques out there and forms of meditation that you can introduce into your daily routine or your weekly routine, whatever you decide to do, that you can practice with. Like when I did the Gateway, that was great. Here's a program that allows you to go outside your body, to travel, something I always wanted to do, to practice something like that. That brought me to much higher consciousness. But then also going back to 2009 after my accident, 2010, is I started focusing and meditating outside my body. So I would close my eyes and I would force my consciousness to spread out across the room, almost like a breath. And I would just go across the room, or I would see myself going up to the other levels. And ironically, I was actually going there in some shape or form and coming in contact and recognizing spirits above me. Now when I walk into a place, I'll be like, okay, there's someone on the second or third floor. I can see them moving around as if my eyes right now are going to exactly where they're at. Even though my physical body is on the first floor, my eyes are quickly darting to exactly where they are within that room. That's doing that with my consciousness, my perception to perceive where they are, that discernment of spirit. So, learn about discernment of spirit. learn about out-of-body experiences, higher consciousness, become familiar with those terms and those practices, adopt them, and then you will be able to do that. Now, the other thing that can be, which you don't specifically state in this question, but I'm sure it's there, well, how do I know the details I'm getting? How do I know that they're accurate? Well, that's a really tough question because you don't have someone else to sit there with you and communicate as well to make sure they're getting the same message as you. The only thing I can tell you is that you ask specific questions. If nothing comes from it, don't force it. Try to assume or fill that blank with a picture or an image or a feeling. You just become neutral. You open up and you allow their imagery, their emotions to come into your space for you to recognize what they're trying to show you. And then you just say it. Sometimes it might be there for a second or two and then it's gone. And you're like, it went so quickly, I don't know if that was it. A lot of times it is. That first impression, that very quick impression is from them or from spirit. So acknowledge that. Record some of your experiences so you can play it back and see the details you get or write things down. I used to use a legal pad, but now I use my iPad and Notability app and I'll write stuff down really quick. But the problem is I get stuff so fast, not able to write it down fast enough. Or you could record it, audio record your sessions as well. You learn from the data that you receive. This is a really interesting question here from, it's blah, 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 DIY, something like that on Twitter. It's kind of long. But they said, I am from Brazil, and I see a lot of mediums there that can freely communicate and see spirits. For example, Chico Xavier. I feel like in the USA, most mediums just have a sensation or see images that relate to that spirit, but do not really have deep communication. Why is that? It's a great question. That would be a question probably for each one of these psychics. Now, if we're watching this on TV, I can tell you this, that a lot of times on TV, they're not showing you all the details in the communication with the spirit that this particular medium might have. I mean, I spent an hour talking to this Black Knight in Coblagan Castle. He explained his entire life to me, the girlfriend he had or the woman he loved, what happened to him and her, the village, and how he was treated by the village, how they saw him. They saw him as the devil because he was in all black, and how the laird treated him. And to me, it was an incredible story. None of it was in the show. Because on the show, they just want to get certain details and they want to put it in and package it for the program. So if you're asking this question because what you're seeing on TV, I can tell you a lot of that doesn't make it in the show. The conversations. Because they don't want to have and show a 15-minute conversation with the spirit when the show itself is only 42 minutes long, 43 minutes long. They still have so much else to cover. So that's a tricky question in that aspect. But yet, there are many investigators out there that are calling themselves a psychic medium when they're just sensitive. And they should not be calling themselves a psychic medium because they're not actually communicating back and forth with the spirit. They're just getting certain sensations and images. So that, I don't believe, is a medium. A medium is someone that can actually communicate with the spirit. A medium can also channel and can allow the spirit to pass through them, feel the sensations of how they died, stuff like that. That's what a medium is to me. So if you're saying they're just getting sensations or images, I would not equate them to being a medium. I just would equate them to being sensitive. Because I've worked with people that are even on production, all of a sudden they get a certain sensation, they feel something there, and they've got images in their head. Wow, I just got this weird image in my head. Does that make them a psychic or a medium? No. Makes them sensitive, or that the spirit is trying to communicate with them and show them something. Hopefully that answered your question. Here's one from Cindy Struck. How do you know if it's fear or intuition? Well, the question would be that I would ask you if you were in front of me is, what is your definition of fear? What are you creating the word fear or attaching the word fear to? How do you know if it's fear or intuition? Does that mean if you're getting an image or a vision of something in the future that's terrifying or something really bad that happens, like a traumatic event, and then it happens? Well, it's an event. It's not the actual fear. Intuition, something pops up like, I got a feeling this person's going to call me, or I got a feeling this is going to happen today. Wow, why did this famous person pop into my head and the next day they die? That's all form of ESP, form of intuition. You know what? I got a feeling I forgot something from my house. What did I forget? And you look in your bag. Oh my God, I forgot my other shoe. And then you go back home. You paid attention to that intuition. It's not fear. You have a dream or something, you're getting in a car accident. That's not fear, that's intuition. What I think you're stating is that you're attaching this fear because now you're afraid because you had this vision and you don't want it to happen. So you're afraid of it happening. And what sometimes can happen is that you change your pattern or whatever, and then it doesn't happen. Or it does happen and you've been afraid the whole time. I mean, there's so many different complex paths that can occur within this, okay? Like, I give you an example. I changed the severity of an event. I did not change the actual outcome. And this was intuition, okay? It was a couple years ago, I went out with one of my exes. We went out downtown, had something to eat, and then we were going to stop over at this bar that people we knew that owned it. So it was great hanging out with her. We pull up near State Street, and I park the car, and I sit there, and I get this image that if I open up my door, something's going to hit it, like a car or a person. And I'm like, oh my God. So I kind of froze. She was like, what are you doing? I said, just wait. And I'm waiting for like 30 seconds or so. And she's like, just come on, let's go. And I'm like, I felt myself, because of her pushing me to go, I went a couple seconds too earlier than I should have. And as I open up my door, a bicyclist is riding by real close to the parked cars. And he had a backpack on. And as he's riding by and I open up my door, his backpack gets caught on my door, rips him off the bike, and he goes flying. Thank God there was no car coming. He would have went right into the path of the car. And he hit hard. I was like, oh my God, you know. And luckily, there was no damage to my door. His bike flung around and everything. So I got out of the car and make sure he's okay. And I looked at her, I go, gosh, darn it. I told you there was something that was going to, she goes, well, you're the one that opened the door. You know, they blame it back on you, right? But here's the thing. It happened regardless, right? If she would not have pressured me, there would have been 1 or 2 seconds and I would have looked at the door and reached for the handle and you would have saw the guy go by, okay? If I would have opened it up earlier, what could have happened is he could have driven right into my door instead of being caught on it. So the intuition and the fear of something bad happening prevented me from opening up the door to complete the worst event, which would have been worse, okay? Because it would have damaged my door and would have probably hurt him really bad. So there you go. It could be a combination of both of them. But regardless, is you must pay attention to the vision, the outcome, and the event to prepare for it or try to prevent it in some type of fashion. Okay, we've got like a couple questions left here. This is from Sarah Wood. Someone has psychic abilities, then blocks it out as a teen. Let's say as an adult, they better understand what was happening and wanted to be more open. What advice would you offer to be more specific as a psychic empath? Okay, so you blocked it as a teen, but now as an adult, you want to be more open. Well, I shared a story previously when I was doing Dead Famous and with the seance with Marilyn Monroe. You already have the ability. So what advice would I offer? Just tell the universe, I'm ready to perceive it again. I'm ready to accept it. I'm ready to feel it. Just let's open this doorway up. It's already there, but now I'm going to expand my consciousness instead of being narrow-minded or narrow-focused because I'm trying to protect myself. You already have it. So and it's not really blocking it. You've chose to ignore it, and in doing so, your focus has become more narrow that it does not recognize it happening when it does, if that makes sense. Okay? So, to better understand, to be more open, the advice is just be. Go out, go for a walk and watch people and sit there and watch them. Watch them have conversations and just tune in to what they're doing and allow yourself to feel what they're feeling. I've done this when I go to malls or whatever, and I'll sit there and watch people. Even sometimes at the gym, I'd sit there and watch people, and I would feel and sense what that other person is feeling. Okay? That's being open. That's being an empath. So go ahead and do that. You've got it. All right. The next one, Robert Jersey Devil SS. I remember vividly, like I had a connection that shut off when others told me what I saw didn't exist. Did I truly see that? And how can I open my eyes again to possibly have this gift that I had shut down before? Okay, so you remember before you had a connection and you also shut it down, or you saw something that you felt didn't exist. So you're questioning an ability or an experience that happens, after you've had several experiences, you realize, okay, it's just a natural part of what I'm doing and what I'm seeing. Now you're asking, did I truly see that? I don't know any more details of what you saw, so I can't actually answer that. Somebody said, well, can't you be psychic and pick it up? Yeah, but I don't know this person, and you're telling me to pick up something I don't know a person. I'm not there. I don't know any other details. What is it I'm trying to pick up on? Right? There's millions upon billions of things out there. I need to be more specific, very similar to when you do remote viewing, they get a target, right? What is my target here? Okay. Now I consider if I'm talking to the person and I'm hearing their voice, I can start getting images from their life force because they've had their experience, which is recorded in their soul and their life force. And as my life force starts to interact with theirs, it'll pick up on those past memories and those images, and then I'll start feeling and seeing those images. You're saying, how can I open up my eyes to possibly a gift that I had previously shut down? Like I said to previous questions, is you already have it. You just need to accept it and be patient and just open up to it. And just say, okay, I'm going to open up my consciousness because I've narrow-minded it. It's kind of like instead of zooming in, you're going to zoom out so you see a greater picture. And you're going to allow your body, your mind, your spirit to listen and feel. Like I tell people, just listen. And it's not with your ears. Sure, you can listen with your ears, but it's listening with your mind. And what do you feel change with your mind? Your mind is connected to pain receptors, to taste, touch, and smell. So don't think with those. Think with your mind that's connected to all, because your mind is where your consciousness resides and utilizes through the brain. Hopefully that makes sense. All right. Another one. A lot of you turning your abilities off. Michael Sears. What's up, Michael? How do you turn it on and off? For me, it just happens when not expecting it. Well, there you go. So it's a natural occurring ability to turn on and off by itself when something's happening. So we tend to think that it goes on and off. But what it is if we look at a frequency, let's look at a random generator, and you just see it's just pretty neutral, might blip a little bit here and there, but occasionally get like a really big blip. That's because something's happening. So it's registering. So we might always say, well, I'm turning it on or off. Well, you become narrow-minded where you don't pay attention to those blips. They're still happening regardless or not. You just need to increase your awareness. So it's not really turning it off or on. It's like, how often do you all look at the back of your hand and the front of your hand, and you look at all the wrinkles and the nails and the fingers? I bet most of you, maybe 99% of you, never do that, unless you're getting a pedicure or something like that. But I guarantee you, majority of you have not sat there and looked at your hands for 5 minutes looking at all the stuff that's on your hands, taking the time to actually do that and go, wow, I didn't know these wrinkles were here. I didn't know this scar was here. Oh, look at this, look at that. We don't even do that, but yet it's been attached to us our whole life. So it's just awareness. It's that simple. Every living soul, every soul that's died has access to higher consciousness because it comes from the source, which is higher consciousness. We are higher consciousness, but we're not conscious of it because we're in a three-dimensional realm that filters it out. So, attach yourself to your higher consciousness that is not limited or restricted by the three-dimensional realm of time, space, and gravity. Perceive that, and you will receive. It's that simple. All right? Thank you guys for your questions. I really appreciate this. The next podcast I will be going back to the structure of interviewing people. I have a bunch of people lined up that I want to interview, some really amazing topics and some really interesting things that I think we need to dive into for Spirit Talk to get back to teaching, learning, and lessons and other people's experiences to share with us. And that's what I will be focusing on. So for the next month, I will be seeking out some of these individuals that I want to interview and booking time with them and doing recordings. So expect to see some really interesting guests over the next couple months. Thank you guys so much for listening. I think there might be one or two other things I want to share with you before I go. I'm going to be redoing my website. I've been talking about that for a while. Barry Guy was supposed to help me with this. I sent him some money to kind of build up flesh out the website and stuff. And then he got busy with Help My House Is Haunted. So I've got to do this on my own, which I plan to do in October and November and get that launched. Paranormal Access events. For some of you that know and don't know, I've been doing events all over the Chicagoland area and in states right up against Illinois, such as Wisconsin, Indiana. I like to do stuff that's within a driving distance so that a lot of people can go to. Pay attention to some of the Paranormal Access events that will be coming out in 2024. I've got another one that I'm going to be doing in November, most likely in November 11th. It's only limited to 20 people, but we're going to be going back to Indiana next year because it was phenomenal, and I'm working on that. And some other locations we haven't done, and then returning to some locations as well. It's a great chance for people to get together and ghost hunt. We have such a great Paranormal Access family, which is the PAC family, okay? They go to almost every event, and it's just wonderful. So if you are interested in coming out to one of the Paranormal Access events, stay tuned. I'll be posting that on my ChristopherFleming.com website as soon as it's redone. Plus, you can go to Eventbrite. Go to Eventbrite and look for Paranormal Access events, and you will find my logo and all the previous events we've done. And if you subscribe to it, you'll get notifications and information when I drop new events. And please know that these events sell out quickly. I've had events sell out in 8 hours, and I've had events sell out within 4 to 5 days. It's usually within that amount of time that they sell out. So jump on it. And then also, I'll be talking to Woodstock Opera House about possibly doing another pop-up Paracon for next year. There's some changes and there's some additions and a whole bunch of other stuff, but I got to take a look at what the budget's going to be and if it's going to be affordable to be able to do it. So that'll be a discussion I'll be having with them in November. And if we are going to be doing another pop-up Paracon, you'll hear about it in January. Okay? That's about it. I'll have more news in the next podcast. I know we've gone a little bit over today, but it's been a while. So I hope you enjoyed me looking at the different ways to handle certain psychic abilities and the questions that were offered up in this particular podcast. Plan to do this again in the future, but you know what? It's time to get back to interviewing some of these other people. And that's what you're going to hear on Spirit Talk. I'll see you guys next podcast. Have a good one.